Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. January 3rd, 1999. We're down at Alltel Stadium in Jacksonville for this battle between the New England Patriots and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The importance of this game cannot be overstated, since this is in the wildcard round of the playoffs. Not only do the Jaguars have a chance to get revenge on the Patriots for eliminating them in the 1996 AFC Championship, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, but it is a historic game for Jacksonville, as in their short, 4-year history, this is the first time ever that they are playing a home playoff game, having earned that right by winning the AFC Central. On this Floridian Sunday to kick off the new year, the stakes for this one are simple for both sides. The winner of this game moves on, either to face the New York Jets or the Denver Broncos in the divisional round of the playoffs, and the loser goes home, with their season coming to a disappointing and abrupt end. Oddly enough, this is not the first time I've done a video about a wildcard game between the Jaguars and the Patriots, as if you want to learn more about the other time the teams met in the wildcard round, which came in the 2000s, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And when all was said and done, it was the Jaguars who came out on top, taking it by a final score of 25-10, and never trailing at any point in the contest. The defense came to play on this day, holding the Pats to just one first down in the first half, and making Scott Zolak's stay a living nightmare under center, as he completed less than 50% of his passes while posting a passer rating of 50.4, well below the league-wide average. Rookie running back Fred Taylor had an amazing day at the office, running for 162 yards on nearly 5 yards per carry, including a touchdown in the second quarter. And the thunder and lightning duo of Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardle gave the Pats fits all day long, as the two men combined for 11 receptions, 128 yards, and in Jimmy Smith's case, the touchdown in the fourth quarter that really gave the Jags some breathing room. Tack on 4 field goals from one of the best kickers in football in Mike Hollis, and 3 turnovers forced, and the Jags were moving on in front of their home fans, with the first home playoff game in team history being an absolute success. However, there was something bizarre about this game that if you were a Jags fan watching it at the time, you may have noticed. I mentioned earlier that Fred Taylor had a great day with 162 rushing yards. He had 33 carries on the day. That is a lot of carries. Excluding the runs by quarterback Mark Brunell, 2 of which were kneel downs that really shouldn't be counted for obvious reasons, Taylor was the only player to actually run with the ball for the Jags. You would think he would get a breather at some point during this game, and you would think that maybe someone else would get a carry every now and then just to lessen his workload. But nope, Taylor played the entire way. Where was the second running back on the Jags? Where was the number 2 guy? Well, for this game, he was suspended by head coach Tom Coughlin, and you're not going to believe the reason why. It's a true case of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and we're going to take a deep dive into that today. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest controversies, not just of the 1998 Jaguars, but in the history of the wildcard round. Before I talk about the controversy in question and what exactly this player did, we need some context to understand who this man right here in question was, how important he was to the team, and what his status was supposed to be before the uber-disciplinarian Tom Coughlin decided to lay the hammer on him. This man right here is Iowa rookie running back Tavian Banks, and he was drafted by the Jags in the 4th round of the 1998 NFL Draft. The Jags, in an effort to bolster up their running game, which was pretty mediocre in 1997, and was taking a hit by losing their top rusher, Natron Means, in free agency to the San Diego Chargers, decided to take not one, but two running backs early on in the draft. One of them was Fred Taylor in the first round, and you can learn more about him by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Seeing as he might be the greatest Jaguar of all time, I think it's safe to say that that one worked out pretty well. The other one? None other than Tavian Banks. And when Banks was called upon early in that 1998 season, especially following an injury to James Stewart, who sprained his left knee and was placed on injured reserve for the entire season following the third game against the Baltimore Ravens, he did his job. The 1-2 punch of Fred Taylor and Tavian Banks, when they were both on the field, was pretty good. On Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, Banks had 9 carries for 75 yards, averaging well over 8 yards per carry. And the following week against the Buffalo Bills, after getting the start for an injured Taylor, he had a very nice opening drive to the game, where he scored his first career touchdown on a 10-minute drive. In the 4 games after Stewart went down, Banks had 139 rushing yards on 5.6 yards per carry, and he had some really nice kickoff returns throughout the year as well. In Week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs, for instance, with the Jags leading 14-6 to open up the second half, Banks opened up the half with a massive 65-yard kickoff return to set up a touchdown drive, giving the Jags a 21-6 lead in a game that they ended up winning 21-16. Banks was a major asset on offense and a major asset on special teams, and it looked like the Jags had found themselves not one, but 2 great runners in that 1998 draft class. However, as was the theme for the Jags running backs in 1998, if you played running back for the team that year, your chances of surviving were about as good as a character on Game of Thrones, because everyone seemingly died. Fred Taylor suffered injuries. James Stewart was on injured reserve for just about the entire season. And Tavian Banks, right as he was getting hot, had a sprained foot. He had to leave in the middle of that Bills game, in a game that he was on pace to get over 100 yards for, and he missed the following game against the Denver Broncos, and the game after that, and the game after that, and every game for that matter, until the end of the regular season. The bad news for Banks, after such a good start to his career, and after looking like he was going to be a massive contributor to the team, was that his season was cut short, missing the final 9 games of the year. The good news, though, was that the Jags were good enough to win the division and make it to the playoffs with an 11-5 record. And while the foot injury was going to keep Banks out for the end of October, all of November, and all of December, there was nothing about January in there. That's an extra week. That's 1 more week to heal and rest up and have the foot recover. The end of 1998 may have been a wash, but the start of the 1999 calendar year was not. Just about everyone expected that this playoff game against the Patriots was going to be the long-awaited return of Tavian Banks. All Banks had to do was not do anything stupid and show up to the team meetings and whatnot, and he'd be back in the lineup for this game. And I'm sure you might be able to see where this one is going. Kind of. Because it's not like that at all. Trust me, it's even stupider. On Saturday, January 2nd, the night before the playoff game, the Jags were staying at a hotel downtown. The plan for the players was simple. Arrive at the hotel on Saturday night, we'll have a team meeting there to go over the game plan and go over some final things, and then we'll sleep in the hotel and transport to the stadium as a team on Sunday morning. What hotel the team was staying at? I'm not sure. All we know is that this was a hotel downtown, which will become very important in our story later on. And Tavian Banks, alongside Cordell Taylor, the team's second-round pick at defensive back, who didn't do much of anything, was a big-time bust for the team, and was inactive for the second half of the season as a healthy scratch, were in the same car, driving to the hotel for the meeting, when suddenly, the playoff game was the furthest thing from their minds. At this point, the playoff game was just that, a game. An important game for sure, but just a game nonetheless. This was bigger than that. This was their lives. Because in the blink of an eye, their entire lives, and for the purposes of our story, the life of Tavian Banks flashed right before his eyes. While the two men were driving, they got into a car crash. And this wasn't a fender bender or a minor crash that was a massive inconvenience. This was a big crash on Main Street Bridge, as in the Blue Bridge over the St. Johns River that took you directly into the Jacksonville landing and downtown. So even though we don't know the exact location of the hotel, because we know it was downtown, we can say that they were roughly a quarter-mile away from the location. They were almost home free, about to attend the meeting and not think twice about it. But while on the bridge, the car, being driven by Taylor, flipped over 4 times and hit a guardrail, being dangerously close to flipping over the bridge and into the river entirely. The car was completely destroyed, but fortunately, the two men were okay. We don't know the details of the wreck and who was at fault, if Taylor was speeding with this man that you've been watching the whole time, Tavian Banks, in the car alongside him, or anything like that. All we know is that it was Cordell Taylor's car, and the car flipped over 4 times and hit a guardrail. Eventually, the two men arrived at the meeting, albeit 30 minutes late, and were taken to the hospital for an evaluation afterwards. The good news, again, was that they were not injured. Somehow, not only were their lives spared, but their bones were spared too. However, the two men weren't active for the wildcard game against the Patriots. Taylor was always going to be inactive for the game. Again, he had done nothing of note all season, and was a healthy scratch by this point in the year. But for Banks, this was a big blow. He was expected to come back and help lessen Fred Taylor's load, and here he was, unable to play because of the auto accident. And I think everyone assumed that the reason that Banks couldn't play was because he was in the wreck and was hurt from it, which makes sense. If you are expected to play 24 hours before the game, and then you don't play, and it comes out that you got into a wreck where the car you were driving in hit a guardrail and flipped over 4 times and you had to be taken to the hospital, yeah, you assume that the reason that he's out is because of injuries sustained in this brutal wreck. But oh no. Oh, absolutely not. Because you see, the Jaguars in 1998 were led by this man right here, head coach Tom Coughlin. And if you know anything about Tom Coughlin, you know just how strict he is and how much of a disciplinarian he is. He's got a bunch of rules that he expects his players to follow, including one about sunglasses that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And one of the things that Coughlin does is that he operates on Coughlin time. All of the clocks are ahead by 5 minutes. If it's 6:55 in actuality, on Coughlin time, it's 7 o'clock. His mantra is simple. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, oh man, you don't even want to know what's coming. The idea is that if you care about your profession and care about what you do, you'll plan around it and make every effort to be there when things are supposed to start, which means arriving early and giving yourself plenty of time. Show up late and break the team rules, and you're going to be suspended and not play. It's that simple. And while I'm sure Coughlin was on the very extreme end of things, and I truly mean the extreme end, I'm sure every coach has something similar, where if you show up late, you're in trouble, and you're subject to a fine or a suspension. And as we learned, as it turned out, Banks absolutely could have played in this game. Again, he was totally fine. His foot was fine, and nothing that happened in the auto accident impacted his ability to play in this game. The reason he didn't play? Tom Coughlin, you guessed it, suspended him for being 30 minutes late. Despite the fact that he was late because he almost died, seeing as he was a passenger in a car that flipped over 4 times on a bridge and hit a guardrail, that didn't matter. Oh, and on top of that, Banks got slapped with a $500 fine. Seriously. As Coughlin said, no one's more thankful for the fact that those 2 young men were not injured than I am. However, facts are facts, and they don't cease to exist because we want to ignore them. The accident took place at a time that was very, very close to the meeting time. They were running late. They were going to be late for the meeting. There's a lesson to be learned here for young players. It's harsh in the short term, but it's consistent, and it's the way I've always dealt with fines in the long term. Translation: I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad you didn't die, but I don't care. You're getting fined and suspended. You're not playing this game. For what it's worth, Banks didn't comment on the matter, and neither did Taylor. But what makes this statement by Coughlin seem even more crazy than it was is that Coughlin, after looking at the facts of the crash, said that it was very, very close to the meeting time, and they were going to be late. Note that it wasn't past the meeting time or at the meeting time. It was close to the meeting time. So when the accident happened, the meeting hadn't started yet. And what's crazy is that I've been to Jacksonville many, many times in my life. I know exactly where this took place. You can get to the Main Street Bridge from any hotel in Jacksonville, which is where we know this meeting took place and where the team was staying, within 2 minutes, especially on a Saturday afternoon. The odds that Banks and Taylor would have made the meeting on time, if they didn't almost die, were astronomically high. If you want a comparison to New York City, this is not like the meeting started in 5 minutes at the entrance to Madison Square Garden, and they were in Times Square or the Bronx. This was like the meeting started in 5 minutes at the entrance to the Garden, and they were in the Amtrak lobby at Penn Station. Obviously, it's entirely hypothetical, but considering where the meeting was, where the accident took place, and everything about the timing of this, Banks and Taylor were going to be on time for this one if they didn't wreck. And yet, despite that, and despite the fact that Banks clearly was not at fault because he was a passenger, seeing as Taylor was the one driving, again, I don't know if Taylor was at fault or not, but Banks clearly was not at fault. Yeah, this is just insane stuff right there. I should note, as you can probably expect, that some people in the NFL Players Association were up in arms about this. However, wide receiver Keenan McCardle, the player representative for the Jaguars, did not lodge a formal complaint. So there was nothing that the NFLPA could really do about this. Tavian Banks had some awful luck throughout his career, especially from an injury perspective, especially in 1999 when he got hurt midway through the season. Between that and between this $500 fine and suspension for nearly dying, some guys really just have no luck whatsoever. The punishment issued by Tom Coughlin is a clear difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Coughlin suspending guys and fining guys for being late for a team meeting makes sense. If you arrive late because of your own doing, or because you lose track of the time, or because you just don't care, that's one thing. And no one's going to argue that. But I don't think the rules really apply to a player who was going to be on time for the meeting and wasn't because he almost died on his way there, completely not at fault. That seems like an entirely different set of circumstances. But for Tom Coughlin, this man right here, that didn't matter. Because when it came to Tavian Banks, not only did his life flash before his eyes prior to the wildcard game against the Patriots, but so did his playing time, as well as his bank account. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.